everybody. So now that we have a good understanding what three elements are most commonly used through the arm structure to get you to actually pitch the club back behind you in transition, I want to dive into something else here, which is about the backswing. I know that obviously the shallowing takes place in the downswing or in transition, but it's not the only priority. As a matter of fact, the backswing is extremely important in being able to allow us to determine two things. Number one, whether you even have the ability to shallow the club or not, meaning if the backswing is aligned in a certain way, you're going to make it very difficult to ever be able to shallow the club, and we're going to go through a couple of scenarios of that. But also of number two, determining what variables you can use if you're able to do so in order to get you to shallow the club. So a lot of times when I'm looking at a player who's maybe coming down steep, well, I immediately look at the top of the backswing to say, okay, well, what does it look like? Does this golfer have the ability to shallow the club? Does this golfer have specific variables that they can use to their advantage? And so in this priority here, number one would be the hand depth in the backswing, meaning how far back are their hands getting at the top of the swing. And this is because the natural forces that we are going to apply to the club in transition might help us or they might hurt us. And so we're going to go through a couple of scenarios here. So when I'm talking about having sufficient depth to the arms, essentially what I mean is having the arm structure a little flatter and a little more behind the player at the top of the backswing, so more in this type of direction. And so this is extremely important because if your arms get too upright at the top, oftentimes your body is going to start to react to that and create these compensations at the bottom to get you to shallow the club. But because you're going to be doing it through your body, and we know why that's a penalty from previous videos, obviously that's going to start to create a lot of timing elements that are problematic. So one of the things that is important is making sure that we create a nice big turn, because everything's connected here with our body. Right? The hands are connected to the arms, which is connected to the chest. So when we create a full turn with our body, we're going to naturally start to influence our hands a little more behind us at the top, so a little deeper. Now, this is extremely important for two reasons. Number one, if our arm structure gets deeper at the top, there is now more space for me to rotate on the way down. Keep in mind, if my hand path is going to start to move in and around my body in the backswing when I rotate on the way back this way, well, my hand path is going to do the inverse on the downswing, meaning it's going to want to rotate more in front of me and then around my body here. And so if our arm structure gets too upright at the top of the backswing and we try creating rotation on the way down while retaining our body inclinations or our posture, well, as soon as we start to do that, our hands are going to end up so far out in front of us, we're going to get too steep with the angle of attack, and our club head and shaft pitch is going to come down too upright and very out to in with the path. And so a lot of golfers are either going to struggle with the ball flight and contact issues, or their body's going to adapt to try to prevent that, and then those compensations come in. Whereas if the hand depth is a little more behind the player at the top of the backswing, right? So let me get myself into a golf posture here and try to recreate this for you guys, right? And I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit. Well, if my body starts to rotate and retain my body tilts, you can see my hand path is still somewhat inward, meaning it's a little more in front of my chest here, a little more behind me. Whereas if my arm structure gets very upright and then I try turning, my arms get way out in front of me. My hands are no longer here, they're way out there. And you can see how, if I have this club head here in this direction, I don't even necessarily need to change the pitch of the shaft. If my arms just get deeper in the downswing, all of a sudden I'm naturally swinging more from the inside. So it'll be a lot easier for me to be able to come in with a shallower shaft angle in the downswing if my arm structure is deeper up top, meaning more behind me. So having those arms be a little flatter, if you're somebody who slices, especially and you're trying to get your path a little more from the inside to allow you to shallow the club, having the arm structure a little flatter and more behind you is hugely beneficial. The second reason why this helps is because when our arms are deeper in the backswing, obviously that means there's going to have space for them to move out when we start to rotate. Well, when our arms start to move out, we are going to start applying a force to this shaft, right? Meaning if my arms are here more behind me, let's say, right? And my arms naturally are going to move more out towards this direction in the downswing when I start to rotate, which will take place. Well, if I start to apply a force outward to the shaft angle, guess where the shaft is going to start to travel? Take a look. I'll hold the club right in the middle here. If I push the handle of this club this way, which is what's going to happen when my arms move outward, well, that's going to apply a force to the club, which is naturally going to want to help me shallow this shaft out. You see that? And so if I'm just standing here with my arms deep enough and I push my arms out, because that's what's going to take place naturally when my body starts to turn, well, I'm applying a force to the handle in this type of direction, which naturally wants to tip the club head back behind my body. And so According to the forces we're going to be applying to the club starting down, when you're starting from a deeper position, it's a lot easier for you to get the club into a shallower spot. It doesn't guarantee it by any means. Obviously, there's a lot of different variables in play here, but it certainly will help. It will create an influence to some degree to the shaft to try to help you to shallow it out. So having the arm structure deeper oftentimes really helps. Whereas, if your arm structure gets very upright, right, we see one of two patterns. Either the golfer tries to rotate well, and although the hand path moves out, even if this shaft angle is trying to get flatter, the arms are going to be so far in front of the player that you're still going to come in relatively steep onto this golf ball, which is obviously problematic. Or what ends up happening is the golfer is well aware of their variables, meaning they know that they're upright at the top, and their body starts to react subconsciously. And so what ends up happening from there is the golfer might either pull down on the club, which gets their arm structure very narrow, the shaft angle too close to their body, and the shaft obviously is going to get steep, right? Just like we're pushing out with the hands is going to shallow the club, pulling down on the hands is going to steepen the shaft, right? And that's going to create problems. Or the golfer is going to start to do things with their body to try to get the club down into the inside by trying to prevent the hands from shooting out. So they might lean back away from the target a lot, and obviously if their shoulder on the trail side starts to drop down and back, that might theoretically shallow the club, but they're doing it through their pivot, meaning they're still going to flip at the bottom and whatnot. And so if we want to be able to create that independent shallowing through the arms, a lot of that will help if you start from a position where the arms are a little more back, and that's really going to make it a lot easier for you to lay this club down in the downswing to a position where you can start to create that freedom with your body to turn through the ball. So hand depth, very important.